Navy, a three-wheel German Enigma machine, which is your standard issue. Now the Navy would have four wheels, and when I say wheels, I mean these. Okay, and the reason the German Navy had four was because they had better security. Basically, the more wheels you...
The Navy had better what?
Security.
The Navy had better... the original Enigma machine had three wheels. This is when I say wheels, I mean these right here. Okay, eventually the German Navy would have a fourth wheel because it had better security. The problem was the German Navy got suspicious because all of a sudden the British and the Americans, etc., were having success sinking German ships and things like that. They never had those before. So the German commander, his name was Karl Dönitz, he was in charge of the German Navy at the time. He got suspicious, so he went to his experts and he asked them, "Are you sure this machine has not been compromised?" And they told him, "No, don't worry about it." He didn't believe him, so he added a fourth wheel, and that essentially just put the German Navy Enigma machine back in. It put the German Navy back on top.
When did he do it?
1942, 1943, right around that time period. Actually, early 1942. Oh, this was before. This was before. Right.
So the one we captured on the submarine was a four-wheeler?
They added a fourth rotor.
I don't know the answer to that, but it should have been. The problem is that not all German Navy submarines had four wheels. They were supposed to, but took a while. You know, they had to come back to port and they had to refurnish them and things like that. I should know the answer to that, but I don't. Okay.
Well, we'll find out.
Okay.
Thank you.
But it was carried to Bletchley
As long as it lights up, it's good. Okay, so again, this is a three-wheel machine, and what I want to do is make it break the code and show you how easy this machine is to work. Any one of you can run this machine, which is actually a good thing. That's one of the good things about this machine. It's just so easy to operate. The problem is that the Germans used it way too much against their better judgment. This machine was figured out by the British, actually Poland first, then Germany, Poland, then the British, and then by this time the Americans in the war. This was originally a commercial machine. It was available right around the end of World War I. What the Germans did, though, was they took the commercial machine and they made adjustments to it. One of the adjustments was that this right here, these plugs. Basically, the original commercial machines didn't have these plugs. All this does is it provides additional security. It's like a pinball wizard, basically. A pinball machine. You pull a lever, bing, 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 bing. The more bings you have, the more secure it is. These plugs increase the number of bings. Okay, now let's go ahead and make and break the code, and then I'll explain a few other things about this machine. Okay, so what's very important to keep in mind are the numbers next to the wheels here. If you don't have these numbers right, the machine is unbreakable. It became all about finding these numbers. If you don't have these numbers right, you're out of luck. So you have to find these numbers. The numbers go up to 26 because there are 26 letters in the alphabet. Now these are numbers, but some of the German machines use letters. The German Air Force, for example, their machines use letters. So they go up to 26. So what are the numbers here? Can someone tell me?
11, 14, 18.
11, 14, and 18. See, 11, 14, and 18. Okay, now, what we're going to do is we're going to put something in gobbledygook. Can someone give me a three-letter word that's not dog, cat, hat, or NSA?
Pig.
Ask.
Pig.
Pig? Okay, pig was first, so we'll do that. P-I-G. All right. And the reason I want a three-letter word has nothing to do with three wheels. I simply want to show you how it works. 2 letters is not enough, 4 or 5, we don't need that. So we're going to put P-I-G in code. Okay, again, you have to write these numbers down. So the original numbers are 11, 14, and 18 for pig. I'm going to hit the letter P down here, and something that is not a P will light up. I don't know what it'll be, but it won't be a P. What lit up?
Nothing because she doesn't have a good connection.
Oh, all right, okay, then I'll have
Hold
to.
on just a second. Let me see. I can work it. Okay,
A, all right.
A. And then D.
Okay, hold on, I gotta write these down. Then go ahead. What was it, Z?
Yep.
Okay, so we have turned PIG into ADZ. You all saw that. Now we're going to turn it back into PIG. How do we do it? Not so fast. What we need to do is we need to return to the original numbers. There's a reason I wrote those numbers down. The original numbers were 11, 14, and 18.
So you have
Now they're 11, 14, and 21. This wheel turned one notch every time I hit a key. That is a flaw in the machine. It's predictable. You know what wheel's going to turn and how many times. Our version of this machine, which is not all that well known, it's called Sagada. It's on display at the museum, at the National Cryptologic Museum, was never broken in World War II because it corrected all the German mistakes. You've never heard of it because it worked. You tend not to talk about the success stories. The Enigma machine is famous because it really didn't work very well. Okay, so all we need to do is go back to
18.
Can you let go for a minute?
Yeah, it's easy.
Go back to
There it is.
I need to take it back to
Way past that. Oh, wait, no, you're going the right direction. Sorry. There you go.
okay,
You're already
11,
here.
14, and 18. So that should work. Now what I'm going to do is hit A and P should light up. Let's see what happens.
P.
Now I'm going to hit D and what'll light up?
I'm about the letter I.
And now I'm going to hit Z and G will light up. Where's the G?
Oh, wait.
Let's see.
Z is. There you
There
go.
you go. If you have these numbers right, it works every single time. It's all about finding those numbers. Now, if you have another German Enigma machine, and you do exactly what I did, you get a different result. The reason is because that machine has got to be exactly the same as this. There's internal wiring that's got to match. The German military had about 10 of these wheels. They're all wired differently. Plus the plugs have got to match as well. So it's not simply a matter of going to another machine and lining the numbers up. Everything has got to match. So that's basically how it works. It's very easy.
Well, how
to
do you
run.
get them identical? And
What?
How do you get them
Okay,
identical?
how do you make them identical? There's a code book. The Germans had a code book, and you had to know in advance. So in other words, you have two machines, A and B, talking to each other. They both need to know in advance. It's 11, 14, 18. Which holes are filled in, which aren't, which wheels are used. They both got to be in sync. If they don't, it's not going to work.
These numbers change with every word you enter.
Yes. Every time I hit a key, this wheel will turn.
The next word, dog.
It doesn't matter what it is. It just will be something.
You'd have to start with a different number.
Everything written in sequence from the beginning,
Yeah.
put back in the same sequence is going to decode.
Now, question for you. What makes the second wheel turn?
I'm guessing, taking wild guesses, the first wheel actually rotating through 0,
26 poundings.
but the messages could be more than 26
Absolutely.
characters. So
Yeah, that's why I got to write it down. In other words, the second wheel turns, you hit the key 26 times.
And then-
What makes the third wheel turn? 676. That's how it works. Okay. So it's really important is you have to have these numbers right. You have to know what plugs work. You have to know the internal wiring. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
So anybody that's going to decode the message that's being sent has to have an Enigma machine that's identical or very similar,
Yes
exactly
and no.
like the
It
first.
has to be
Okay.
configured the exact
It
same
has to
way.
be configured the same way, but here's the deal. Now let me give you an example of how this works. That's a very good question, and I can answer that. Okay, so how does this work exactly? Let's pretend we're a German submarine. It's 1943 in the Mediterranean Sea. A German submarine has finished its mission, so it's going to report to Berlin, mission accomplished, heading home. So what it'll do is it'll pull out its Enigma machine, its code book, it'll make sure it's the day's information, all the numbers, etc., are correct, and it'll put in gobbledygook, heading home, mission accomplished. It'll send it by radio. The message is out there by radio. Anyone can snatch it. Anyone, to include the Americans, the British, Sweden, who knows? Anyone could. They get the gobbledygook. Berlin gets gobbledygook too, but Berlin pulls out their Enigma machine and their code book, and they're able to figure it out.
And they know the origin. They know who sent them the message.
Yes.
And they know
So that way they can set their machine to match it.
Yes.
You know, but you can't. You said you can't just set the machine. It has to be manufactured exactly the same.
It has to be lined up the same. The numbers have got to match and everything.
So the Navy machines and the Air Force machines and the Army machines aren't all compatible, but they'd have a compatible machine and an identical code book. And
Yeah,
the
in
code
other
book would
words-
have a list of the wheels
Okay.
to use, the plug board settings.
Suppose
On which
Berlin,
day?
suppose that submarine wants to send PIG. Okay, they're going to pull
That's an
out
interesting way to
the
spell
right
that.
numbers. They're going to have this lined up. They're going to have the wheels lined up. So they're going to send PIG. Berlin is going to get ADZ. They're going to pull out their code book. It's ADZ doesn't mean anything to them. So what they're going to do is they're going to line up the numbers for the day. It's got to be the same numbers, the same information, the same plug holes, and what's in here as well. Once they're able to do that, they can read the message. Now, what happens if you don't have the code book? The British get this message. It's gobbledygook. It's ABZ. They can't read this. Okay? So they got to figure it out. We captured Enigma machines left and right. There were thousands of Enigma machines. It wasn't hard for us to get them. What the British needed to do, though, and then the Americans, was figure out how this worked without, they had to figure this ADZ out. But they don't have a machine. So what they had,
I know how they got there.
Okay.
So the thing of it is, the Germans, being nice Germans, decided to end every message with Heil Hitler.
well, that was one of the problems.
Yeah,
That's the clue.
So they were able to figure out, if you count that, they could figure out which character was H, and then they could play with the wheels to figure out what the code was.
There was a
How many
second
of
level
you-
problem as well. You talked about the flaws in the machine are inherent in machine design. The second problem was the three-letter code that you're talking about. The field procedure was every 24 hours a new code was supposed to be used per the code book. But
They got complacent.
the German soldiers, the radio operators who were using it, were lazy and they wouldn't change the code
They
every
were
day.
lazy? Oh my God.
So the same code number was used 2 and 3 and 4 days in a row. And if Bletchley Park had happened to have intercepted a message and broke that message, they may get 3 or 4 days of message to decode out of it until they change the next
Can we
code.
demonstrate?
How many of you have been to the museum? Okay, there's a big monster machine there called the U.S. Navy Cryptanalytic Bomb. It's a big monster machine. It was created by Poland, the first country to figure out the German Enigma machine.
Marion
Then the
Rejewski.
British, Marion Rejewski. Then the British had their version that was done by Alan Turing. The one at the National Cryptologic Museum was the Navy version, our version, the third generation. The purpose of that machine, it's a big monster machine. It's not a computer. It looks like it's electromechanical processing machine, a rapid analytic machine. The purpose of that machine is to find these numbers, these plugs, and the wiring. That's the job. It runs 24 hours. That's what the British did to figure out these numbers, because they don't have an actual Enigma machine.
So the daily code book had to have not just the wheel numbers, but also
It had
a
everything.
dozen plug.
Yes,
And
it
what's
had
the,
all
what
that
do the
stuff.
plugs actually do here?
The plugs,
Plugs are transpositions.
yeah, the plugs add additional security. It's like I said, you pull a wheel, you know, it's like a pinball. Bing, 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 bing. Okay, here's what happens. You hit a key, you open this up, it goes through here, it bounces back, and then it goes back, and then it starts in here again. In other words, it's this, bing, 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 all the way back. It's instantaneous. This increases the number of bings. The more bings, the more secure. That was the whole reason for it.
And more specifically, each plug is connected to another plug.
Yes.
And will change the listed letter to the other letter
Yes.
in the code text. So it's just an extra step.
It's just an extra step.
Can we demonstrate?
Absolutely.
By encoding something?
Do whatever you want.
repeating
Okay, the
letters?
problem is these aren't lighting up like they're supposed to. And I've never had that problem before.
Working now.
Because if you wanted to send,
Did it work?
oh yes.
Oh, yeah, then.
See, it's unreliable. But go ahead, try. We'll do whatever you want to
Contacts
do.
dirty on the
If you
rotor?
repeat
Hmm?
the
The
letter,
contacts on the rotor's dirty?
it changes.
Shouldn't they?
Yeah, because the wheel changes every
Right,
time.
but because this
it's not
changes,
simple.
but
It
this
should
determines
Wipes
it
every
too.
time it changes.
This will
There's a
turn.
problem, which is that if you press the F, you'll get every single letter You'll never get F.
Yeah, that's a flaw in the machine. It'll never repeat itself. In other words, you can hit A all day long and A will never repeat. Our version of this machine had the A repeating. The fact the A would not repeat is a flaw. You look for patterns.
Right.
That's
Get rid of
what
that
you do.
pattern.
Yeah.
No double letters.
The only thing the battery does is light the lights.
I'm sorry?
The only thing the battery does is light the lights.
Yeah.
The battery.
Everything else is
It sends the
mechanical.
current
Yeah, it's all
through the
mechanical,
machine.
right. Yeah. Now, there were different versions of the machine, but basically this is how it ran. Now, there were different versions of it. The Navy had their own, the Army had their own, but the operation is basically the same. That's why it's such a great machine. Any one of you can do this. They just used it way too much. You know, I like to call it the lunch pail of German military. There were thousands of these machines. They were tanks, subs, trains. You know, they were everywhere. We captured them. Our museum has like 40 of them. You can buy one of these on eBay. It's just going to cost you a lot of
Can
money.
you buy military ones or just the civilian ones?
Can you
I'd
get
have
the
to
Navy
look.
kind?
But be very careful because there's a lot of fraudulent information.
There's a lot of replicas out there, and somebody's actually ported one of those, the operation, to a Pi, Raspberry Pi computer.
I'm sure there is. It's trivial with the modern computer.
Yeah, you can. The real money. I shouldn't be telling you this. The real money is the maintenance of these machines. There are very few people who know how to fix these machines if they're broke.
And I don't imagine the spare parts are handled by that.
How would you know?
Yeah. In other words, it's not. So what do you can? The machine's great, but if it breaks down, you know who's going to fix it for you? There are very few people that actually make a living. When I say very few, I mean this many on my hand. I mean, there's maybe one or two that actually is skilled enough to fix these machines. It's a real art in itself. You get a contract with the government, I almost guarantee it. The museum, you know. So anyhow, that's the basic operation.
Is this the serial number?
Yeah.
I wonder where this specific machine is from.
This is one of our traveling machines. We know the origin of it. I could probably find out for if you really want to know. And of course, this is the German here. You know, so it tells you the basic operation of it. I don't know the history of this particular machine. We do have one on display that was owned by Hitler himself. Yeah. Now again, this is a 3-wheel machine. Let me give you an interesting trivia on it. I mentioned the 4-wheel machine. We're talking about you know, going on eBay. The 4-wheel machines are very rare. Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones is a 4-wheel Enigma machine owner. He has one.
Really?
Yeah.
What's he do with it?
He actually financed one of the Enigma movies. There have been 3 Enigma movies made. The first one is a Polish film, which is like from the early 1980s, boring, very technical. The second one is more Hollywoodish. That's the one Mick Jagger was involved with, you know, Kate Winslet. And then the last one is The Imitation Game, which is more Alan Turing.
What did they do about numerals?
Oh, good question. Yeah, this is the kind of thing you need to know. The Germans, basically, they spelled out all the numbers. If you look at this machine, there's no 1, 2, 3, 4. Another thing, for the letter Z, apparently in the German alphabet is not used that much. So that's your space bar. So in other words, if you need a space, you hit Z. Okay.
So notice the keyboard layout is a little different.
It's a little different,
Very
right.
similar to what
Yeah.
we
Yeah. But this was done on purpose.
And this is Z instead of Y.
You know, if I can open this up, I can show you the internal wiring. Again, every one of these wheels is lined up differently, so you have to know which wheel it is.
All the wheels are uniquely identified, and some of the machines, the wheels, the positions could be moved in different places.
Yes.
So part of the encoding was getting the right wheel in the right place and the right patch on the patch panel, and then you needed the right 3-digit number.
Yeah.
So the patch panel adds an additional level of pseudo-randomization to the code. Inside each wheel, there's a series of contacts on the edges there, and there's wires that join one contact to another, and each wheel is differently wired from the others that are of a different number.
Anything off at all is going to throw it off.
But they all had the 26 and then the 26.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the wiring inside each rotor is different, depending upon which one it is. So if you've got like
And that
rotor wheel
wiring
number one-
affects all the pings and everything that happens.
Right. What it's doing is creating a convoluted path between the keyboard and the light.
And when you solve it, you can just write out all the paths. It just takes a huge amount of computational power.
Yeah, the schematic diagram of that on paper is simple, but when you actually use it and you trace a path every time something is set up for a letter, it gets real psychotic and long path to get through there.
By the
That's why
way,
there's certain unreliability.
Where do you get
Our office has an excellent book on the Enigma machine, the basic operation.
You're all for what? I'm sorry.
Our book has an excellent. Our office has an excellent book on the Enigma machine. It's easy to understand. Just contact me. I get it for you.
ABC.
Thank you.
You have the same tactic because they're routing on those. Some of the numbers have wires so they can reach further paths.
Enigma, by the way, is what the Germans called it. That was the Enigma company. It was their name.
It's even like a trademark on it.
Yeah, it's a great name for a machine like this, but that's what it was called. The information that came from it was known as Ultra.
Well, the way the patches
ULTRA.
are and the rotors can be
Hey everybody, I'm with the staff. We want to get a real quick photo. This will take
rotors
like
come
30
out.
seconds. Can we part a little bit?